GILT, G-I-L-T, stands for Globalization, Internationalization, Localization, and Translation. But what do these terms mean? That's what we're going to talk about today, so let's dive right in. My name is Tucker Johnson. I am the co-author of the General Theory of the Translation Company and one of the co-founders of Nimdzi Insights, where we provide market research and consulting specialized for localization. Today, we are living in a globalized, connected world. It's easier than ever for brands to have a global presence. For companies with a mature approach to international operations, this presents a huge opportunity to reach new customers. However, it can also be a huge risk for companies that do not invest effectively into the activities known as GILT. Once again, globalization, internationalization, localization, and translation. But wait, what are these activities and what's the difference? There are a surprisingly large number of different answers out there. A lot of people disagree as to the exact definitions. So today, we might not be able to settle the debate once and for all, but we will discuss how these terms are used in real language by industry professionals. In other words, we're ignoring the dictionary and going straight to the source. While this is a huge topic that could be discussed for hours, I'm going to try my best to keep this short and sweet today. Let's start with globalization. Globalization is often abbreviated with the numeronym G11N, with the 11 representing the 11 numbers between the G and the N. Globalization refers to all the activities necessary to make your product or service ready for global markets. This is typically used as an all-encompassing term that includes the other activities of internationalization, localization, and translation. For example, in common industry jargon, the term globalization department is often the term that is used to refer to the internal teams that liaise with products and developers to ensure that everything is properly internationalized and localized. The term is sometimes used to refer to a sort of high-level internationalization, which seeks to answer questions like, have you removed any features or components that are specific just to your home market? Or can the product or service be adapted to local standards, such as sizing, power supplies, and other hardware requirements? Just to name a few. Internationalization is the process of making sure that your products and services are able to be adapted to each market, essentially going several layers deeper into the weeds than globalization. Is all of the English text able to be easily exported and then re-imported in order to facilitate the translation process? Do you support the necessary fonts and encoding for other languages? Does your user interface support right to left and bidirectional scripts like Arabic or Hebrew? If these things and many other things were not taken into account during product development, or even if they were, then your product needs to be internationalized. Particularly for organizations that have a strong digital presence, there can be a lot of hidden steps to internationalizing. This is a process that looks very different for each company because every organization has different products, software, both internal and external software, and most importantly, different customers. While there are some standardizations available for software localization, they can be invasive and really they have inconsistent results. This is why most organizations develop an internationalization program internally, perhaps with the help of outside suppliers. One note is that internationalization is the last step before we start localization, which involves potentially dozens of other languages. This means it is our last chance to fix issues once before they go into translation. Otherwise, one small issue with the source file can multiply into however many languages you're translating into. Much more efficient to fix these issues once before translating or adapting anything into the local markets. So, speaking of adapting into the local markets, let's talk about localization. This is the process of adapting content for individual markets. So while globalization and internationalization are concerned with whether your product is acceptable for the world or all markets, localization takes that internationalized product and actually starts the adaptation process. There is more to localization than just translating. This is the step where each individual market will be taken into consideration and cultural linguistically correct changes are made. These changes range in severity from small things like changing slang terms to local vernacular, all the way up to mission critical issues like ensuring you don't include content that's offensive either to your users or to world governments in which you're operating. You don't want to wake up one day and realize that you're banned in China because you included the wrong flag in your language drop-down list. These are the type of things localization covers. While translation only focuses on written text, localization focuses on the overall product. Images can be swapped out for more culturally relevant content. Color schemes can be changed between markets to account for the different cultural perceptions of colors. Features can be added or removed in order to better align with the values of individual markets. One last thing to note about localization is that in common speech, industry professionals can easily overuse this term. We often use localization when referring to what is actually translation. For this reason, if you are ever having an important conversation with somebody about localization, for example, you're buying localization from them or you're selling localization to them, make sure to clarify just what service you're talking about and what the extent of that service is prior to agreeing to anything. Now let's talk about translation. Translation is, well, translation. This is the act of taking words in one language and converting them into words in another language. Sounds simple. Strictly speaking, this refers to literal translation. So, literal translation would not adapt any concepts or features of the product beyond the text that is found within it. That would be more the domain of localization, I would say, adapting things more fluently. Literal translation, we're just talking about translation. Computer-aided translation, or CAT, tools can extract the source text for translation and then insert translated text back into the product. It's up to you whether you want to use a fully automated machine translation or actually include human translators into that process. So, as we see, each of the components of GILT, globalization, internationalization, localization, and translation, has an important role to play. But the lines between each of these can easily get crossed. You will hear different people use different definitions, and that's okay. So my final tip is, don't get caught up in the terminology. Instead, ask yourself, are we approaching globalization activities strategically and efficiently? Are we providing the same level of commitment to our international customers as we would do for customers at home? And are we doing all these things in an efficient, scalable manner by implementing globalization best practices surrounding internationalization, localization, and translation? If you want to learn more, check out Nimdzi.com, where we have an ever-growing library of resources for forward-thinking globalization leaders. Or you can contact us directly at info@nimdzi.com. Once again, my name is Tucker Johnson. Thank you for listening.